There are certain jobs that you just shouldn't do if you're bad with your nerves, and waitressing is one of them. People are funny when it comes to their food, and by funny, I mean ratty. Chefs can be temperamental, and novice waiting staff can easily be reduced to tears by chefs with tongues as sharp as their carving knives. It was thus an odd choice for a sensitive soul like me during my university years, but the lure of good tips and the potential to be fed as part of the deal drew me in. During the summer of 1998, I worked in a well-known Bohemian restaurant on Botanic Avenue. One day, Patrick Keelty came in for his lunch. He was wearing a very fetching navy blue jumper. He ordered the roast chicken, but he requested rice as a side. I went into the kitchen and asked if they even served rice, because this cafe was renowned for the quality of its chipped potatoes. The chef rolled his eyes and reached into the fridge, found a bowl of rice and turned it upside down, where every grain remained firmly congealed to the bowl. "You may tell him the rice is off," said the chef, which indeed it was, in more ways than one. Back I went and said I was very sorry, but there was no rice in the menu today. Patrick was very gracious and said that was okay, and could he have a baked potato instead? "Lovely," I replied, wishing to God that he'd just ordered the chips, because potatoes were hit and miss. I've never been one for spitting when I speak, so it was unfortunate, as when I took the menu from him and said thank you, that a large bit of spittle flew out of my mouth and attached itself to his navy jumper. It stood out starkly against the blue. He spared me the indignity of looking down at it as I scarpered off to fetch him a Coke. I soon got fed up serving hungover customers greasy fries of a morning and forsook this bistro to tackle a different restaurant. And this is how I came to work in one of the most popular eating establishments in the late 1990s in Belfast, a Mexican restaurant with real Mexican chefs and the best burritos and chimichangas in the Northern Hemisphere. But here, the kitchen staff were equally as capable of fucking up. A gentleman came in one evening and was very animated as he placed his order. "Now," he said, waving his hands about for emphasis, "I don't like cheese. I really, really don't like cheese. I don't like it on my food, near my food, and especially if it is melted on my food. I don't like cheese." He smiled as he said it, but there was a hint of menace below the surface. "My brother is the same," I said. "Don't worry, I've got this." I printed the order and wrote "no cheese" in big letters as I sent it up to the dumb waiter. I then rang the kitchen to check that they had received the order. He was most emphatic. I explained, "No cheese in those enchiladas. Not a whisper, none." The next time the dumb waiter came down, it had my dinner in it, a bowl of nachos with lashings of sour cream and guacamole and salsa. I took it upstairs to tuck in. But I had barely had the first mouthful when I heard the shout from below. "What is wrong with you people?" yelled the man as I came barreling down the stairs. He looked as though he were about to cry. "I couldn't have been any clearer," he said. "What bit of that did you not understand?" It was no use trying to tell him that I had twice exhorted the kitchen staff to take particular care with this order. Clearly, it was just all my fault. I trotted up the 3 flights of stairs to the kitchen and stood there while they prepared a fresh, cheese-free dinner, and then I returned to my soggy nachos. It turned out that the porter to whom I had spoken had had a large spliff before his shift, hence the almost total eradication of his short-term memory. One night, I really wished I'd had a spliff myself. Back then, there were a few notable drunks who hung around the university area. They were large and drunk and filthy. Sometimes they would wander into the restaurant and we'd have to usher them out before they put all the other customers off their food. One evening, one of the largest of these gentlemen managed to sneak in and take a seat in a nook near the window. For some reason, it was up to my 5'0" self to deal with his extraction. Up I went to ask him politely to leave. He ignored me. "Excuse me, sir, but you really have to go," I said a little louder. He didn't like this one bit, and up he reared, roaring in my face so that I stumbled back into one of the heavy wooden chairs and fell. Up I sprang, and another waitress helped me, and we managed to get him to vacate the premises. The manager ushered me out the back to recover. About a minute later, out came the other waitress. "Me nerves," she said, lighting a cigarette. This left only one other person on the floor. So ironically, I, who should have been the most traumatised out of the three of us, had to go back and serve the margaritas so that this waitress could finish her fag to get over the shock of seeing me lying on the floor. I christened this girl "Me Nerves" because she was from County Offaly, and she used this phrase "me nerves" a lot, at least 10 times a night. She certainly used it a lot the night of the fire. It was Christmas time and all the office parties were booking in. Space was at a premium and the tables were close together. As I welcomed the diners, it was my job to relieve them of their coats. The coat stand mushroomed out to 3 times its size as I beetled back and forth. I was taking the drinks order when a man leapt up from his seat, raced towards the coat stand, knocked it to the ground and started jumping up and down on it, like a man deranged. I wondered whether I should just make a run for it, but then I smelt the acrid stench of burning leather. As the coat stand had expanded, layer by layer, the sleeve of a jacket had brushed against one of the tea lights, which we lit to create ambiance. Me Nerves, with whom I was working that night, was particularly keen on the old ambiance and had lit an excessive number that evening for full festive cheer. There was little in the way of festive cheer by our manager when she discovered that the coat had been burnt beyond repair and was a £300 camel jacket. The customers, after the initial stampede towards the stand to see if it was their coat, "Jesus, you'd have thought it was a child," said Me Nerves, were in high spirits, especially after several bottles of bubbly were sent to their table by way of apology. The whole incident caused much hilarity. When I went to take their food order, at least 5 of them requested flame-grilled coats for their main course. After that incendiary evening, I was in need of a drink myself to calm my nerves, which were as shredded as the beef in one of their finest burritos. After closing, a few of us headed back to the Holy Lands for a party, and on the way, Jesus, a ridiculously handsome Mexican chef, planted the lips on me against the wall of the Christian Scientist Church. "I really shouldn't," I said. "I have a kind of boyfriend." Jesus was not to be dissuaded. "Love," he said, "is like the best cuisine. You can't just try fajita. You need to try all the dishes. Burrito, fajita, enchilada." He gestured over the wall into the gardens of the church, where he thought I could sample all of his Mexican delights. Tempting as his offer was, I declined. Enough sparks had flown that evening without having to quell the flames of his Mexican desire. And that's all.
Thanks very much, Ellen. Magnificent. Nice to hear your Mexican accent being thrown in there amidst all the other things. What was the name of that place on Botanic?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say, to be honest, because
Oh, really?
yeah,
Oh,
there were all sorts of things went on. Will go on, sure. It was Acapulco, and then
yeah.
it closed for a while, and now it has reopened again. But
All right.
they were always stoned. They were always stoned. I don't know how they managed to stay open as long as they did. And then I worked there after my time in Reunion Island. Sure, I was always stoned as well, but that took the edge off. I think it was better. I was a better waitress for being a bit stoned.
For people who have never heard Helen's story, Helen years ago went to Reunion Island as a French teacher to pick up on French and to deepen her French knowledge before passing her French teacher exams, and spent the whole year high. on substances loaned to her or given to her by her students. So you might want to have a check out on that. It's amazing that you managed to teach young people at all, Helen.
It is, when you think about it.
Yeah,
And now that information is on the airwaves for everyone to hear.
I know. Yeah. Anyway, it's great to hear your story. As always, thank you very much.
Thank
And you've
you.
managed to call. You said earlier on in the chat that your room looked like there had been a hurricane through it. You've
God, I
managed to.
want to show you. God almighty. And there wasn't even a table, and they'd actually taken all the cushions and shoved them down the end of the other sofa. I mean, it's unspeakable, Porrick.
These are your children, you mean, not your parents?
Oh no, so yeah, they can't come, sure, because of the COVID.
Oh, of
So
course.
normally it would be tidier because they would come and they would clean up. So the mothership
Oh,
back in Bangor, it's awful, to be fair, it's awful.